Okay, I see it's 10:33, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully some others will join us. I am Marge Johnson, the president of the Newcastle County League, and I want to welcome all of you this morning. Um, as Kara said, we had 90 some people registered, so hopefully more people will join us. So this is a great response to a very important and timely topic that we have this morning. So, um, Happy New Year to everybody! Welcome to the program, and I just wanted to say, because there are so many people on, if you all could mute yourselves, that would be great. And if you want to turn off your video as well, they tell me that helps with bandwidth. I have no idea what that means, but that's just what they say. So you might want to do that as well during the presentation. Um, Please enter your questions into the chat, and Kara will be monitoring that. And at different times during the presentation, we will stop to address those questions. This program is also being recorded, so if you do not want to continue with it being recorded, you can sign yourself out, but I just want to make you aware of that. And the recording will be on the Facebook, the State League of Delaware State Facebook page. So this morning's topic is on redistricting, which our State President Sandy Spence has been chairing for us, and on the Fair Maps project, which Denise Davis has been the coordinator for. So I think, Denise, are you starting off with the presentation?
Yes.
I don't know who's doing what. Okay, so I'm going to let Denise introduce herself to you and give you a little bit of her background, and then some of what she's doing. So will you be sharing a screen, Denise?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody knows you can enlarge the screen, pull that line over so that you can see what Denise is sharing. So welcome everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Denise.
Thanks, Marge. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the People-Powered Fair Maps presentation, Redistricting 101. My name is Denise Davis. As Marge indicated, I am the Fair Maps coordinator for this project. This is a project which you'll see through the presentation, are participating as one of 50 states and as well as the District of Columbia in that the League of Women Voters US has orchestrated for us. By way of introduction, my background, I live in Sussex County. I have been here for about 4 years. My background, I am a health researcher and also have worked in health policy, administration, and management. My most recent stint has been with Moores, where I was a project manager, project director for a funded initiative across probably about 15 states. And the whole notion there was to highlight how we could actually be more transparent and coordinate healthcare initiatives in healthcare settings to people who were part of the settings, i.e. the health departments, et cetera, but also to be transparent to users of the system and to create greater opportunity for the ACA to be disseminated. So that's what I have been working in. I've worked for a variety of grant makers, as well as Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for several years. So without much more ado, we're going to get into the presentation, and I'm going to share my screen with you. from the top. For a minute while I get into slideshow. Okay, hopefully all of you can see my screen. So we're going to start by identifying some of our key partners in this initiative. DELCOG, the Delaware Coalition for Open Government, and ACLU are two of our major partners in this work. We have other partners that we are working with, but we just wanted to highlight the fact that they are working with us in this initiative. As I mentioned, my name's Denise Davis. I'm the Fair Maps coordinator, but also we have on our committee working on this project, Sandy Spence, who's the acting president of the League of Women Voters of Delaware, Lauren Bertelson, who's our outreach coordinator, Nancy Lopez, who is our diversity coordinator and translator, Kara Hoffner, who's our technical coordinator, and are aided by two legal advisors, Jack Young and Mitch Crane. Today, we're going to be discussing these following topics. We're going to talk about basics of redistricting, the connection to the census and apportionment, understanding some of what gerrymandering consists of and fairness factors, how redistricting works in Delaware, and what kind of impact you can make as we move ahead with this project. What is redistricting? Essentially, it's the process of drawing legislative maps in districts, and it is based on the use of census data, which is collected every 10 years. And you know that just in 2020, we have had a census. And even though the number of districts may not change, districts must be redrawn so that populations can be equal. And as a side note, in Delaware, we would be anticipating that we'd have some increase in populations in all of our counties, but particularly in Newcastle and Sussex County, where there's been a lot of building going on more to these areas. So looking for that. The census data is used to redraw the lines and boundaries of the electoral districts within the state. And as I said, census occurs every 10 years. And the data that census collects affects all levels of government with respect to redistricting, from local school boards and city councils to state legislatures, and the House of Representatives. So redistricting involves map drawing in the creation of these boundaries for the districts. And as you'll see as we go along, it identifies, who will be your representative within the districts that have been drawn. So what's the relationship between census, apportionment, and redistricting? Well, reapportionment is the process of adding or reducing the number of members of Congress a state has based on its population. And redistricting takes the number of people per seat in each district into account in the map drawing. So you've got to have an equal number of populations, give or take about 5% in each district. Right now, the census determines the distribution of more than $1.5 trillion in federal grants, funds, and other supports that states receive. Also, counties and communities, based on their population data, um, have a certain amount of money that they receive associated with census data. So here's a position that the League of Women Voters US has on the redistricting process. They're very interested in the fact that it needs to be fair. There has to be fair and effective representation, that there are standards or criteria that are used for redistricting, and there's a maximum opportunity for public participation within the process. I'm going to stop here for a minute and ask Kira if there are any questions to this point.
Good to go. Not yet.
All right, thanks. As I said, in the process of redistricting, criteria is very important, particularly to the project that we're engaged in. In redistricting, we must have a substantially equal population in each district. As I noted earlier, we should have geographic contiguity. There needs to be a promotion of partisan fairness. There also needs to be a understanding of who are the communities of interest, and those communities of interest need to be preserved and protected. There has to be a respect for boundaries and municipalities and counties. And as we're looking at all this criteria, compactness and competitiveness should be considered as long as they don't conflict with the criteria here. And what isn't on this slide is also the need for transparency in the process. So the League's position about redistricting really rejects these specific activities and devices. It's noted here, the protection of incumbents is one device that is utilized in redistricting, as well as the preferential treatment for a political party where they consider voting history or candidates' residence. And I have to also indicate that some of these particular tactics have been utilized in the state of Delaware.
Mm.
So here we're talking about what is gerrymandering. And there was a governor in, excuse me, in Massachusetts in 1812 that created a map for a district in Boston that was in the shape of a salamander. And it was a partisan map. And then there was a renaming of this process to gerrymandering, where they used his name, his last name, and the portion of the mander, the salamander, or a designation of what is a manipulated district. How does that look? So gerrymandering was the practice that had been noted. Here we're showing you an example of, on the right-hand side, what this map in Boston looked like. And on the left-hand side, it is an example of racial gerrymandering in North Carolina. As you can see on the right-hand side, where they're highlighting the first congressional district in green, what they're doing there is packing all the Black voters into two convoluted districts. So all of them have been packed in a particular way. And in the 12th congressional district, where you see the kind of orange, that stretches across several counties. But the aim there is to also pack and to reduce Black representation, because again, all of these people have been packed, but it's in a different form. This slide is an example of what is packing and what is cracking. So in the first representation here, where you have these 50 people, 60% blue and 40% red, that basically says that you have more blue than red, right? In the first representation, you've got 3 blue districts and 2 red districts, and they're kind of equally representing their groups, and that's fine. And blue wins because there are more blue than there is red. But in 2, they're showing you what is actually a way to pack. And so the blue is packed with the red. And so what happens there is red never wins because there are always more blue. And so you've got 5 blue districts and no red representation whatsoever. In the third example, what they're showing there is an example of cracking where the voting power of the blue group is diminished because although blue should win more than it does, it only wins 2 times out of 5 because they have been cracked such that the red wins more often than it should. Here's a quote by the CEO of the League, which underscores the importance of one person, one vote, and a citizen's right for representation. Really speaks about how people feel about how maps have been cracked or packed. And many voters feel like they're not really fairly represented, which is again why we're doing this work. So we were able to find a example of gerrymandering in Delaware. This map was drawn in 2011, and it's one of the worst examples that we've been able to find. It actually shows that that incumbents here are protected, and that's the most significant way that maps are manipulated in Delaware. So here's some of the facts about redistricting in Delaware. And I alluded to this earlier. Transparency has not been a goal in the redistricting process. The public hasn't been educated about what is the process or what might be the timeline for the process. As noted in the earlier slide, incumbents are protected, especially if they're from a majority party. And there has not been any roadmap developed. That is, every time redistricting has occurred, there is no real information about how it's done so that the next time it occurs, we have something to go by. So the process hasn't been memorialized so that there's ongoing knowledge or effectiveness about how it should be done in the future. The People Powered Fair Maps campaign is a national program of the League. And as I said earlier, we are participating along with 49 other states and the District of Columbia. These states all have different forms of advocacy work that they are focused on. In the state of Delaware, we're particularly focused on the number 3 here, the state legislative fixes, and number 5, the civic engagement in education. Is to educate the public broadly about the process, as well as indicate what kind of timelines the process has, so that as we go forward, people have the opportunity to weigh in on our process and the maps that are developed. In Delaware, we need to talk about a bit about the communities of interest that I noted earlier. Redistricting does impact communities of color here, and they have not been really considered in the map drawing in Delaware. As a result, there has been limited representation of these groups and the consistent re-election of incumbents in these districts. Next slides, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the principles that help us guide the process in Delaware for redistricting. The process in Delaware is guided by the Delaware Constitution and the Code. And as noted in some of the earlier slides, or alluded to, I should say, the districts should be contiguous. There needs to be nearly equal population, no more than a 5% deviation in each district. All of the districts must be bounded by major roads, streams, or other natural boundaries. And none of the districts should be formed so as to unduly favor any person or political party. The second guiding principle is really about the citizens' right to vote, and that must not be denied. And the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act really focuses on race with respect to this. And so this really prohibits minority vote dilution and points to the fact that there needs to be more fairness in the process. So in order for fairness to occur, these other things that are listed here, numerosity and compactness, minority political cohesion, white bloc voting, and lack of proportionality should not be occurring. So we need to be on the lookout for these particular factors as maps are drawn. So redistricting in Delaware, this slide actually talks about why we're doing this work. As I noted before, it's not been transparent. It's been conducted in secret by the General Assembly leadership. It also protects and advantages incumbents. There's no written roadmap, as we noted earlier. There's no documentation about how it's done to guide the current practice. There's no education of the public about the process to ensure and to support participation. And it advantages the use of the historical practice, the way they've done it in the past, by virtue of keeping it secret and having legislative leadership take the lead in doing map drawing. And what we want to be able to do here is to promote fair maps as opposed to what has occurred in the past. So here's our goal for the People-Powered Fair Maps program. We want to establish a knowledge base among Delawareans, and that will take us educating people about what is redistricting, what is the process, what's the timeline for this, and why is it important to you. We also want to address the significance and the process of redistricting. How is it done? And get people engaged in the practice of actually drawing some maps, as well as helping to engage others so that they understand what it means to them, and as well as, you know, what kind of representation they will have going forward as a result of redistricting. Also, we want to talk about what should a fair maps process for Delaware actually look like. So we would like to develop fair maps and see whether or not we can get the General Assembly to accept the maps that have been drawn by a group of people beyond the General Assembly. So not just us, but everybody that engages in the fair maps process. We want to, in this process, be able to preserve communities of interest. And we also want to address conflicts of interest. So we really would like to have the voters pick the legislators as opposed to the legislators picking their voters, which is what has been occurring. And we'd like to create some sort of a roadmap for the future so that there is ongoing information about how this process occurred this time, so that the next time it occurs, there can be a roadmap for what to do. Here's the fun part: how you can get involved. So there are a number of roles that we actually would like people to engage in and get involved in this process, and they're listed here. And I'm just going to kind of quickly roll down the list. So we need people to help us actually do presentations and promote a slideshow that would create awareness and education of the attendees regarding redistricting and encourage the public to participate in the process. We're interested in highlighting the issues of redistricting within the social media context. And so therefore we would be looking for people to help us create content, monitor posts, share events, those kinds of things within a social media platform. We also envision having op-ed pieces written, letters to the editor written to highlight the need for a fair maps process to the public, another way to get the word out. We'd like more outreach to occur, and we're looking for people to assist us in the engagement of the public to create interest in redistricting and knowledge of redistricting, and to also share emails and broadly promote the project. We will be engaged in map drawing, and we will be utilizing a number of different map apps to help us practice drawing maps. And Kira is going to be putting some of this in the chat box, some links to, excuse me, some of these apps, including Dave's Redistricting app and others. We are going to be receiving Maptitude, which is the actual software program that is utilized to submit the maps. It's also the software program that the legislature utilizes. So we would be utilizing that, but many of these other apps that we'll be utilizing to practice, the Maptitude program will accept. So we could form these maps one way and then import the data into Maptitude. We're also interested in people assisting us in fundraising avenues to help us defray the cost of printing and other kinds of communications expenses that we envision. And finally, we're going to be engaged in researching a number of things within Delaware, including the history of redistricting practices, Delaware archives, and other kinds of content about map drawing and experts that have engaged in redistricting in the past, so that we have knowledge and content that we can highlight as part of our content that will talk about what redistricting has been, as well as part of the roadmap that we would create for future use. So as I noted, we're going to be engaging in map drawing, where we would have communities come together of our partners and others to weigh in on the maps that are drawn, so that this is a collective process. And then those maps will be shared with community members as well, so that we have wide input into the maps that we do come up with. And as I noted, Kira is going to be putting some of the information about various map drawing programs within the chat box if she hasn't already. And the other thing I would just note is that the National Council of State Legislatures has a redistricting law where we will be utilizing some of that to guide our process as we go along. Should there be any issues where some of these maps be contested and legal kinds of issues would be raised, we will be using this as a guideline. Once the maps are ready for presenting to the legislature, we would be hopeful that we could find people that would help us in the following activities, including testifying at hearings, lobbying elected officials about the maps that have been drawn, and as we noted earlier, some of the communications activities, including writing letters to the editor and op-ed pieces. So we have reached the end of this presentation. We'd like to thank you for your participation in it. But if you're interested in signing up with us to volunteer, you can utilize the URL here or the QR code here, which you can sign up for any of the rules that we have. And then we can get back to you about what are the time commitments for those roles, as well as the specific activities that we see asking you. And with that, I am going to stop and ask Sandy or Kira if there's anything additional that you want to add.
Actually, if Denise and Sandy could both stay unmuted, there are some questions in the chat box. We'll run through them. If you don't hear your question, throw a hand, raise your hand quickly toward the end, but we do have a bunch, so your questions may be answered in some of these. So Sandy and Denise, this is from Trudy Thompson. She's asking, since the only districting in Delaware has to do with Delaware, as we only have one representative, so I'm assuming she's talking about Congress. Are there Delaware laws that affect our redistricting since we're not using federal, because federal is irrelevant to what we're doing?
She
Well-
answered that later. She put the constitutional laws. They're not following them, but she did answer that question later on. So it's
Okay, great.
Well, the federal laws apply to everyone, so they apply to us as well as our state laws. And the state laws are being amended. In fact, there's a hearing this coming week on SB 27, which is repealing some arcane redistricting requirements that haven't been in effect since the 60s, because that's when the Supreme Court has decided that all districts had to be nearly equal in population. And the Constitution used to set up, or does currently set up, districts in the state which are ignored because they're not equal in population. But there will be a bill up this year, and there's a hearing on, I believe it's Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the Senate Executive Committee. That's SB 27.
So the things that Denise put up there are not currently in the Constitution?
Oh, yes, they are. But there's additional language in the Constitution that determines the districts that is out of date by what, 60 years? Anyway, yeah, but that's going to be repealed. And there's a couple other things that are happening to it as well in SB 27.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Marlene Sanders, and she would like you to talk a little bit more about communities of interest. I know both Sandy and Denise were recently on a national call, and they went deep into communities of interest. Denise, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Communities of interest really are about groups that have certain kinds of, how would I put it? They either have certain kinds of, I'm thinking about a couple of different scenarios, but basically I'll just say that they may be interested in religious things, or they're in a community whereby they have a particular political position. They're groups of people that can be pulled together, but not only by race, but other criteria that would be utilized. And in the presentation that we, Sandy, myself, and Carrie were on just this past week that LWVUS created, they have a software program that they were talking about that could help people identify their neighborhoods, actually how people within their neighborhoods could be brought together because they may go to the same church, or they may utilize the same kinds of grocery stores. And so it's a community of like people, like from the standpoint geographically, that they could be tied together across a variety of characteristics. I guess is the way I would put it. Sandy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think they might be interested in taking a look at this program. It's called representable.org. I think it's .org. It's put together by some Princeton students. And it starts by asking a bunch of questions like, where do people tend to congregate? I did it myself, and I talked about, I live just outside Lewis, and so I sort of centered it around the Lewis Library because that's where a lot of people in this area gather. And there could be economic interest, which in my case was tourism, and things like that. So all of those characteristics that are based on various questions about social, economic, etc., kinds of interest, create a community of interest. And it's becoming a very much more significant factor in other states, where it's actually been put into their state laws to require that communities of interest be considered. It could also relate to things like common interests in the school district situation, things like that.
It's quite broad, I would say. And so,
Yes.
again, in Delaware, it'd be interesting to see how these things actually work out. I think that we could use this representable software program to begin having that broader conversation about where these communities of interest exist. Because as I said in the presentation, we haven't in Delaware really highlighted communities of interest very much. We haven't really done that work. So
I just thought of one district that I'm familiar with that is an example of not considering communities of interest. Well, in fact, it sort of does, but it put two different communities of interest in one district. And that's Ruth Briggs King's district in around Georgetown. And Georgetown is pretty unique. It has a very, very high percentage of Hispanics and also quite a number of African Americans. And then that is connected to the area around oh, what's that highway? Anyway, the road where there's a lot of manufactured housing, Long Neck, thank you. And that's sort of the opposite interest. They have sort of opposing interests compared to the town of Georgetown, in my personal opinion. And in fact, in that case, there's not one road that you can go from Georgetown to Long Neck to that area. And so that might be a negative example of communities of interest, but maybe they had to put two together because the one wasn't big enough to constitute an entire representative district, which in 10 years ago required around 22,000 people. So that's sort of a little bit of an example, but certainly putting all those people that live in manufactured housing on Long Neck Road in one district is important, rather than splitting them down the road, down the highway, etc. So does that help? I hope. we'll be talking more about that when we get into actually starting to draw districts,
Right.
drawing maps.
Okay. All right. So the next question kind of came from a couple of different people, so I don't want to target anyone. They want you to talk a little bit more about the gerrymandering that has happened in Delaware and the map that we showed. Maybe we could explain why we didn't point out what district it was and why it was drawn that way.
Yeah. Well, that was just the one district that we could find that looked gerrymandered. And we're not quite sure how it came to be the way it was. But it was intended to say that our problem of gerrymandering isn't as serious as it is in many other states. Because we're so small, it's hard to have really weird districts like you saw on that screen with the new North Carolina districts. But it was a House district, and in fact, if it was gerrymandered to protect, it was probably gerrymandered the way it was to protect one or more incumbents. That's been the practice pretty much, at least in the House in the past. They explicitly have stated to us that they districted to protect incumbents. And that incumbent happened to retire. And so now we have a new person there who is terrific. Well, we're nonpartisan, so I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, so the next question is also again from a couple of different people, and it's so they're wondering where the information, the data that we're getting, explain that it's the same information that the legislators are getting. And then also the turnaround time, like when we're getting the census to when we need to finish.
Well, we're getting it through Maptitude, so we'll be getting it. We expect to be getting it at the same time that the legislature gets it. I did want to update something though in our presentation. Just yesterday or the day before, we got a press release from the Census Bureau that said that they've already started sending out redistricting data to states for redistricting purposes. It did not include Delaware, but it did say that they expect to get all of the data out for redistricting purposes by the end of February. So we're going to have to speed up our process quite a bit. We had assumed that it wouldn't come out until probably May or June. But there's another aspect to this that I really wanted to mention. We had a state law 10 years ago that said that we were going to get rid of what's called prison gerrymandering. And what that is the Census Bureau counts prisoners at the prison. And our law required that they be counted at their last home address. In 2011, there were issues, and it isn't exactly clear what the problem was, other than they didn't start collecting the data early enough and getting it into the Maptitude records. So that law was deferred until this year. So there is a law, and we are supposed to stop counting prisoners at the prison. And it'll be relatively easy because the Census Bureau will tell us how many people they counted at the prison. And those can be deleted from the data. But then we have to put them somewhere else, which is their last home address. And I've been trying to find out for months exactly how Delaware plans to do that. And so far, we haven't been able to confirm exactly how Delaware is going to do that and whether or not that data will be available to us in the Maptitude data that we'll be using. So that's the only question I have about the data problem. But that will affect a couple of districts. It'll significantly affect the Senate and House districts where Kira, what's the
It's,
prison?
Representative District 9 and Senate District 14.
Yeah, that's where the prison, the big prison is.
Mm. Okay, so Sue Claire, yes, we will put the video up on the league website. Because yes, not everybody is on Facebook. That's just going on Facebook now while it's up and running. And we'll also send out the presentation to everyone with copies of the links, just in case you didn't get any of them in the chat box. Okay, next up, Marge Johnson. She wants to know, does the software for the map drawing indicate whether the map you draw meets the criteria that is outlined? So some of the criterias that we're looking for would be communities of interest. We would have to put where the communities of interest are in. All right, I'm answering again, Sandy.
Yeah,
that's true.
but the census data will be in the map drawing database. So certainly the census will. It'll give us also the percentage of per party and things like that, but it won't tell us where the incumbents are, which is what the House did the last time. They made sure they didn't put two incumbents in the same district, protecting all of them, even both parties. They even protected the minority party.
So another question for Marge Johnson would be, can we show an example of an unfair district in Delaware?
Well, that's really what we tried to do with that one that we showed, but we really couldn't find very many that were totally unfair. That one, along with the one I mentioned that goes from Georgetown down to Long Neck. I mean, one of the criteria is supposed to be along major roads. Well, there's no major road that connects Georgetown with Long Neck. You have to go, down this way and around and down, and it hits about 6 different roads to get from Georgetown to Long Neck. And so that would be another example of something that doesn't meet the criteria. And certainly the last criteria that doesn't give unfair advantage to one party or incumbents is totally ignored. The majority party is in charge the way it's done in Delaware, and the minority party has nothing to say about it until they have to pass the law, and then it's just a matter of whether they can overcome what the major party has done, and normally that's not possible because it's just a majority vote. In fact, I understood that last time around the Democrats were in power and were the majority, and they were in charge, and there was not one Democrat in the entire caucus on the House side that had ever been involved in redistricting in the past, because the Republicans had been the majority party for several decades. So that was brand new project for them, but they loved doing it. They enjoyed it.
Sandy, do you also want to just mention the fact that public participation has been minimal as well?
Yeah.
Once the maps have been drawn, the timing issue?
Sure. Yeah, the last time around there were public hearings, but they were after the maps had been drawn. They were made available to the public, and we could go in and testify, but nobody knew how they were done, why they were done the way they were, et cetera, et cetera. So, you could go in and say, oh, well, I'd rather be in such and such a district than this one. And, why don't you draw the line a little bit this way? But it wasn't possible, and nothing changed. And they just went ahead and did what they did. So the public participation was totally minimal. And that's why we're making such a big job of it this year. And in fact, I wanted to mention about the fact that you're all going to be getting the presentation. If you use that presentation with any group, we'd like to know about it, because we're actually collecting data. Denise will be collecting all these metrics about the work that we do. So if you show it to even 5 people in your house, tell Denise, so that we can count those 5 people that got educated by our project. So we really want to keep track of all that.
Okay, so the next question is from Annette Collier. I feel like in your last statement, Sandy, you kind of answered some of these, but I'm going to read the whole question so you could decide. Does the real estate have any involvement? What are the political party breakdowns?
How about one at a time?
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure what that question about real estate is. What you mean, realtors?
So actually, we talked about this in our last meeting a little bit about, because we're having a hard time getting the census on time, we talked about maybe looking at the transfer tax of houses being sold in each county. And that's public record. So if we do have to go down that road, we can do that.
Right. It looks like we won't have to do that now because the Census Bureau is speeding up their process considerably.
Yeah.
I will say that I was an enumerator, so was Denise. And the process was hurried. It was the way they sent you cases was crazy. And so I do not have a great deal of confidence in the data that was collected in this census. But there's really not too much we can do about it at this point.
And the issue with the census is that there might be, because it was hurried and the census actually was not in the field for as long as it has been in the past. The thought is that there might be a certain amount of undercount, but all of the states are going to have to deal with that once the numbers are released.
Right. So that will probably affect us more at the internal state redistricting than it would with congressional, probably. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are the political party breakdowns?
Right now, the Democrats control the House and the Senate and every elected office in the state. So they will have a field day.
But we also in the programs, we can see, if you look at the districts, you can actually have some sense of what percentage of the population within that district are Democrat versus Republican, and a variety of other characteristics. So it's there for you to see as you're drawing the maps.
Right.
Okay, and then her next, she has two more questions. One should be, should this be taught in high schools?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
I like that question.
The sooner the better. It's interesting to me that Jack Young, who's been working with us, has teaches part-time rarely at William and Mary. And he claimed that William and Mary was the only university that teaches redistricting. And I want you to know that my alma mater for my master's degree, Rutgers, is also teaching this now this year. And I think there's probably other colleges that are and universities that are starting to teach this, and even including map drawing. So it's becoming a much more public process than it ever was in the past. And that's because of the gerrymandering and the work of the League and Common Cause and ACLU and groups like DELCOG that are making sure that the public understands. This has an enormous effect on our political practice. There's a movie that you might want to take a look at. We thought about showing it, but it appears to be pretty partisan. So we decided not to show it, but you might want to look at a movie called, oh, I forgot. I'm having a senior moment. Yeah, Slay the Dragon. And so it talks about how one party 10 years ago spent millions of dollars and affected all the elections in all the state legislatures so they could affect redistricting. And that resulted in major changes in state legislatures that then ended up changing the redistricting for congressional districts and everything. It's a fascinating movie, and it's very well done. So Slay the Dragon. It's available online.
So, and then this one is toward Denise. How do other organizations become partners? If you want to tell Annette about our upcoming meeting.
Oh, yeah. We have a upcoming partner meeting that is going to be occurring, and let's see, what day do we have it? It's the 3rd of February, excuse me, at 5 o'clock. We're going to be doing this presentation for other partners, but certainly we could have partners who have interest just contact us and let us know what they would have interest in participating with us and be part of the presentation that we're having coming up. And then we'd like those partners also to help us identify other volunteers to engage in the variety of activities that I noted during the presentation.
Okay, so the next question is from Lynette Brown. I understand the legislators should have census by April 1st. Then what is the timeline for establishing the redistricting lines?
The Delaware law says that it's supposed to be done by June 30th. And several months ago, when there was such a delay in the census because of the COVID pandemic, I actually asked Pete Schwarzkopf, the speaker, what would happen if we didn't get the data in time to finish the project by June 30. And he said it really wouldn't be a problem, because even though the law requires that, if it's impossible to be done, then they'll just do it. And even if they don't get it done until January of next year, it would still be okay. In fact, the year that he was elected was a year when things were delayed by some kind of court problems, and they didn't get it done until January, and he got elected that year, so he wasn't too worried about any delays. But in fact, the law does say that it should be done by June 30.
Perfect. So the next question is from Michael Weiss. Can you talk more about how the redistricting will reflect all of the new developments that are attracting new voters to Sussex County?
Yep.
We alluded to that a little bit before. I think that what we want to be able to do is take a look at the previous maps, as well as what the census then provides us with, and determine, how much those districts will expand because of the population in terms of numbers, or whether or not there are additional districts that will get in Sussex as a result of the expansion of the population. Because I think Sandy can talk to the fact that some districts up north, they may reconstitute, right? Because there's a shrinkage, and so therefore we would gain a district or two down here, but that remains to be seen depending upon what the census data looks like.
Yeah, they keep the same district numbers. So if you look at the list of districts and look in the House, for example, 14 is down here, and formerly that was up north. But in the year that 14 was moved down was because Sussex had grown and Newcastle lost 14. Sussex gained it. And the same thing happened with the Senate district when Senate District 6 was moved down here from Newcastle. So it remains to be seen. Once we get the data, we'll have a better handle on it. But presumably, Sussex definitely has grown and continues to. In fact, I will say that it's still growing so fast that I don't think that within 5 years we'll have adequate representation, considering how fast it's growing. Right across the street from where I live, for example, Governors is just growing. I mean, they're building about 10 or 15 houses a week, it appears. And those people are not going to be counted. I will say, though, that a lot of the new houses are second homes, so those do not count. And so it's not quite as dramatic as it appears to be when you just look at the construction.
But also it really depends when those homes were purchased, because just because they're building them, that the contracts were written before the houses were put up. So
Yeah,
some of them
that's
may
true.
actually count. So we really need
Yeah.
to take a look at that.
If the people lived there on April 1st,
Mm-hmm.
that's the determination.
All right. I feel like that explanation answered the next few questions. One was, what's the likelihood of Sussex picking up another district? You answered that. And then.
And it may have to be shared with Kent, because I understand that Kent County is starting to grow pretty some too.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see the data.
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody lands. All right. The next one is from Shelley Cohn. When the legislature actually does the redistricting, will the public be able to attend a public meeting via Zoom?
I'm sure they'll do some public meetings. We're going to be lobbying them hard to do a Zoom meeting before, during, and after whatever they do. So it depends on whether they cave into our demands. But all of you can have an influence on that by contacting your own legislators and urging them to make sure that there will be a hearing before, during, and after their process. And then go and testify and say that you want to be part of this process and you want to watch what they're doing and so on.
And Shelley, as far as the Zoom, right now, all committee hearings are via Zoom, but as we get closer to being back live, hopefully by the end of the session, we just have to make sure that the legislators stay up with keeping the Zoom feeds going, because not everybody's going to be ready to go out in public, but
Right.
we'll definitely be addressing that. Okay, so the next question is from Keith Steck. The discussion of prisons mentioned only 2 districts pertaining to a large prisons, 9 and 14. But I believe there are more than 2 large prisons. All 3 counties have large prisons. How many large prisons are there? 3. 3.
Yeah, there are. There
Counties.
are. But I think the one up north in Newcastle County will not have as much influence over redistricting as Vaughan. And Sussex Correctional will have a little bit of an influence down in Sussex County. Although a lot of the, well, they tend to put prisoners in the prison that's closest to where they live. So Vaughan is the biggest one. And it has and it's in the most rural area, so it has the biggest impact. The county prisoners at their last home address than Sussex or the one up north, Gander Hill or whatever it's called.
Okay. So the next question is from Shelley Cohn, and I believe this has been answered, but we might want to just go over it one more time. Will the census data reflect an accurate count of actual population throughout Delaware? She's concerned about the non-participation.
No,
I think we spoke to that a bit, but besides the non-participation, I think that from what both Sandy and I witnessed the way in which the census was collected in Delaware, and I would suspect in other states as well, was not great. And we would expect that the numbers that we get might not actually reflect our population. We are concerned about that. However, that said, I think all states are going to be dealing with this same issue. So that's not to say that there's any consolation here for us, but once the census puts out the numbers, I'm not sure, and Sandy, you may have a better sense of this, whether or not we have any recourse with respect to the data that they provide.
Yeah, I don't think there's much we can do about it unless somebody here has an idea, but it's very, very, very unfortunate. But it was a difficult process. It was done in a rush. And, you know, when you do things in a rush, it doesn't always turn out to be as accurate as you would like. But I don't think there's too much we can do about it except wait another 10 years and hope it's done better.
Okay, so the next question is from Donna Dorset. She's asking if the partner presentation will be similar, the same as this one. It's a little different, a little different on talking about timelines. Denise, you want to explain?
All right, roll through that again. I was typing.
Oh,
Sorry.
a little bit about the partner presentation on February 3rd.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a lot like this. I think that we would really be talking about some additional partners that we have currently, in addition to the ones that we highlighted here, and talk about our view about how the partners could assist us in this activity, and the numbers of meetings that we're going to be having with partners, and how we'll be engaging partners, broadly speaking, in the future. As Sandy said, our timeline has been quickened a bit, and so we'll be really thinking about and talking about how best to utilize partners as we go forward. Hopefully that
was good.
answers the question.
Okay, so Lynette Brown would like to know, when would the public have input?
You are the public. It has started. And the more people we can get to go out there and give presentations, the sooner they can get out and do it, the better. But the public we're ready to hit the public running.
Right.
And hopefully our partners will be doing the same.
And
I also think-
Lynette, I also put in a link to Dave's redistricting app. And when I send out the email, I'll send out a link to the new representative website. So you could start practicing with it. And then if you draw a map that you like, send it to us at fairmapsde@gmail.com. That's also in the chat. But start giving us your input, because we are only a couple of ladies and we can't know the whole state. We need your input.
But I think also this speaks to what the practice has been in the past, which I alluded to in the presentation. And what we're really seeking to do here is to engage the public before the maps have been drawn and presented, you know, such that people really don't have very much ability to reflect on them, or in a public hearing to ask that they be changed. Because the process kind of goes on despite that. And so what we're trying to do is get out in front of this, create a process by which the public can engage in the development of maps. And then our hope is that the General Assembly will look at what we developed as a public group and actually adopt many of the maps that we put together, as opposed to the way that they've done it in the past. So it's not only us getting the word out to the public and educating. I think that's part of it, but we also want people to be engaged in the map drawing process, such that it is a collective, collaborative initiative.
Plus, we want to make sure that you are informed enough to lobby your own legislators when the time comes for affecting their maps.
Because Sandy, one other thing I would add is, you know, from in the past, how much has the legislature been lobbied by the public about redistricting?
Very little, very little. I mean, it was usually done by a staff person working for the leader of the House and the leader of the Senate. And that was it. And then it was presented, and then it was enacted. That was my experience at least 10 years ago. So that's all I can tell you.
They haven't been used to having people actually contact them and talk about redistricting. This might be a first, which is really good to hear.
Right.
I just need to say, I also was on a call yesterday that talked about the budget, how the budget is developed, et cetera. And the lawyer who was doing the presentation said, the legislators really want to hear from us because they haven't seen people because of the COVID situation. They've been starved from actually having connectivity to the public. So please contact them. They'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, let's fix that problem.
Oh my God. Okay, that was great. The next question is from Keith Steck. I know this is focused on state level redistricting, but redistricting has a trickle down effect on council districts. What
Yes.
advice do you have for the people to talk to county officials?
Thank you, Keith. 10 years ago, Sussex County League redistricted county council. We knew they would not adopt our districts, but we made a big fuss about it. And we did a lot of public hearings and so on. So if you have a group of people you want to get together and work with, in fact, possibly consider getting the local league to take on the county council, get a group within cities to affect their own city districts. I know that Mickey McKay used to be very active in Del Cog and the league on open government issues. And she was a professor at Del State and lived in Dover. And she told me a story of many years ago. They affected the city in Dover because they had most of their districts were at large. And they decided that left very little, if any, representation for minorities. So they actually lobbied the city council to create districts in the city of Dover. And now that they have districts, and most cities and towns have districts within their jurisdiction, so it's available. And the map, the Dave's Map app was what we used in Sussex County 10 years ago, and that can be used for county and or city municipal districts as well. And the other thing that I've noticed that we want to take a look at is how school districts are decided. Because if you look at a map of school districts, you'll find it's ridiculous. And there is a group that's working on the Newcastle County situation. And then even to a point where after redistricting is done, it's up to the, and Michael Weiss might be interested in this, it's up to the election commissioner to decide the election districts within the representative districts and the Senate districts. And I've noticed that some of the election districts look kind of weird and look like they may be gerrymandered. So I'm very interested in taking a look at that, but that won't happen until after redistricting is done. So we might want to talk about how that function is done. And I have a feeling it hasn't really changed very much for many years. And possibly the election commissioner doesn't even know that he has that job. I'm not sure, he's new, so we wouldn't blame him if he doesn't know about that function. But anyway, we want to take a look at all kinds of districts and make sure that they're appropriate.
Right. And I just would add that in LWV, we have a education group that is looking at the school districts and school issues within the state of Delaware related to the suit from the NAACP and ACLU. And so it's very weird. I mean, Delaware seems to have a number of districts that are not related to each other. In other words, we're not really sure how these things occur. And so the question in my mind is, what's the coordination between all of these activities? And I think by design, there isn't one. So bringing that to the fore should be a conversation, because our tax dollars are going to all of these things within these counties, and people are really not aware aware what impact the creation of these districts or gerrymandering or changing of the district design actually has upon their representation and their ability of these districts to be really done well. So there needs to be a relationship that's not apparent to me. And I think that's something that we need to take up, not for this process itself, but I'm just putting it out there that there is some concern about that as well.
Okay, so the next question is very similar to the last one about Sussex County. Does Sussex County have a requirement to redistrict the county council district using the census every 10 years?
Yes. Yes, all districts, well, not school districts, but all legislative bodies that exist within cities, counties, and states have to be redistricted every 10 years based on the census. That does not include school districts.
Okay. All right, the next one's from Marge Johnson. Is there any way to get an independent commission to do the redistricting rather than the legislators?
Well, I'll tell you what, the league's policy calls for an independent redistricting commission. We have actually John Flaherty, who has followed the legislature for many, many years, gave us a list that he compiled of all the redistricting bills that have been introduced over the last, I think it's 20 years. And there, most of them called for an independent redistricting commission, and none of them got anywhere. We have a much more progressive legislature this year than we've ever had in the past. And in fact, two of them that we've talked to already thought that what we wanted to talk about was an independent commission. We do not believe it. There's time to get an independent commission this year. However, as soon as this is over, we're going to start lobbying for next in 10 years, we want an independent commission. And we think that there's more interest in that within our more progressive legislators than there ever has been in the past. So most of the states that have, as far as I know, every state that has a redistricting commission got that through the initiative process. And Delaware does not have an initiative process. And I'm not proposing that we should get one either, but that's why some of these states have independent commissions. And so we're going to be among the few states that do not have the initiative that will be lobbying strongly to get an independent commission in the future. But there's not enough time to get it this year. So.
Lynette, she was asking a question about public input, and what she meant to ask was input to the legislators.
Oh, sure.
So, yes, we do want, please fill out the volunteer form and just indicate you're interested in monitoring the legislator. So we know to let you have like talking points to go in, and we'll help you along. You'll never be alone unless you want to be alone with your legislator. But yes, we definitely need the input. The bill should be out fairly soon. I don't want to say. Great question, Keith. Okay, John Bucciani. Give the existence of the redistricting committee of 3 Democrats, i.e. House Majority Leader Longhurst, Speaker, and the third with 2 Republicans.
Oh, wait a minute. I saw that question. The redistricting is not done by the administration committee. It's done by the majority caucus. And the leader of that, as you know, is Pete Schwarzkopf in the House and David Sokola in the Senate. So it will be staff working with those 2 people, and then whoever they decide to consult with within their caucus. They probably are not going to be discussing this too much with the minority caucuses until they're ready for a vote. So it'll all be done by the majority party, the way it's done in Sussex, in Delaware right now.
Can I clarify? This is Jack.
Yeah.
The last part of the question where I was getting to was, and I have complete faith in Sandy and Sue Claire and so on. They are very influential as to how this is going to end up. So the question is, who from the league is going to personally lobby
Oh,
these people?
okay. Well, right now, Kira and I are both registered lobbyists, and we will be working on it. And Denise is probably going to be a registered lobbyist by the time we're ready to start talking to them. So we will be representing the league officially. Since this is going to be done by the league, other league members will be able to say, I am a league member and I want you to do this as well. But at hearings, only registered lobbyists can speak for the organization. But all members are able to lobby their own legislators and talk to them and so on, just not as official representatives in public of the league. But so in other words, Kira and I are starting, yes, to answer your question. And then we expect to add Denise soon.
We also have an interview
Oh.
lined up with the
Oh,
person.
also Jack, yeah, Jack Young is also a registered lobbyist. So he will be able to do that as well.
Did that help you, John?
Jack.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the spirit of, I am on the side of objectivity. However, one of the messages was in the past, the lines have been drawn by the incumbents. So I'm happy at the answer.
Okay, great. So we have one last question from Marlene, and then I want Sue Claire to talk a little bit more about her question. So Marlene's question is, could redistricting turn Sussex County from red to blue, or or not?
Wouldn't we love that?
Right now, Peach Schwarzkopf is the only blue person in the entire legislature. And given our history, I don't expect redistricting to have much effect in changing that in the near future. But that remains to be seen. It also depends on the quality of our candidates, their activity, their willingness to get out there and knock on doors and work hard to get elected and so on. So it's, you never say never, but there's a chance. But I also know that Delaware advertised, or I know Sussex County advertises it as, well, no, let's put it this way. I have seen real estate ads that say, come to Delaware because of our low taxes. And I think there's one party that is particularly active in supporting low taxes. And so it doesn't mean that just because there's a big change in population that it's going to be red or blue. It could be either or both or whatever. And so we don't really know whether the new people that are coming are red or blue. So I don't think it's going to change things a whole lot dramatically.
So I'd add to that and say that I do think that there are, when you look at the numbers, particularly in Sussex County, that they're almost equal in terms of political representation. And it remains to be seen what the new people who are coming into the county, what that looks like, you know, in terms of the dynamics. But I also think that it's really important for us to promote this whole education around redistricting, because many people might feel like they are sitting in a sea of red and they really don't have true representation with respect to the issues that they care about. And so the ways in which that occurs is getting knowledge out to people about, you know, why their districts look the way they do, in terms of, you know, the numbers, just the populations in general. And as Sandy says, you know, if people really want to change, this is the kind of on-ramp to people trying to get that change occurring.
And I have to remind everybody here that the league is nonpartisan, so nothing we said here is intended to be partisan one way or the other, even if it sounds that way.
I'm just looking for Sue Claire.
Well,
Oh,
Keith has his hand up.
yeah. Oh, who does?
Keith Seck.
In the interest of full disclosure, since DELCOG is one of the key sponsors, I'm the vice president of DELCOG, so just so that people know that. The reason I asked that question about the county council is because the alignments of the districts will help determine what the election looks like next go around. So not, and having researched the recent registration, this county has a large, obviously a large block of Republicans, a large block of Democrats, but it actually also has a fairly sizable chunk of people who are unaffiliated or independent. So whether one party is going to sweep through like or not, it's hard to say, but the redistricting at the county level will make a difference as well.
True.
I do want to say one thing. So Dave's redistricting app is a great tool to use for smaller redistricting areas. But we are going to have Maptitude for an entire year. The license is only for one user, but we get it for the entire year. So what we are working on this, if there are smaller county councils or school districts that want to like play with just their map, we can do that. We will have time, especially if we're shooting for June 30th to be done with this. We'll only have our license for 4 months. We still have it for another 8 months. So we can look into doing stuff like that, because it seems like it up and down the state, the county council is becoming an issue that they need help with redistricting. So, but we could definitely talk about that once we're done with our part, you know. So,
And we also have the representable that we could utilize. And as I said before, all of these things can be, you know, can use those, create maps and move that data into Maptitude. So there's a way to begin working in the kind of the smaller areas and then move that to Maptitude so we could get it. But the, you know, Kira's point is well taken.
yeah, so there's definitely workarounds that we could try and do. Because being the League of Women Voters, we care about every level of government, not just our state legislators. But I did want to have Sue Claire talk a little bit about, she was asking about the school districts and how, I actually lost your message, but Sue Claire, can you talk about that?
Happy to. I mistyped. But I thought one of your slides indicated that school districts were affected, potentially affected by redistricting. But then Sandy said only legislative bodies, although school districts have an effect on.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm going to check on that to be sure, Sue Claire. But we'll have to let you know for sure. But I believe that school districts are not, and that our slide may have been mistaken. But I'm not sure about that, so I'll check and make sure. Well, but thank you for noticing.
The slide actually says that, you know, that school districts could potentially be affected. And again, because this is a slide deck that's being used across all of the states, we kind of picked and choose some of the slides. We jettisoned some that didn't really apply to Delaware. because LWVUS provided us with a lot of the content. And that's why it alludes to all the things that could be affected by redistricting. So to just make that point, Sue Claire, but in the state of Delaware, school districts are different. And that's some of the questions that we're raising about, what's the relationship between the development of school districts versus the legislative districts and versus the districts that are run for city council, for example. They're all different.
Kara,
And Denise
I'm
is
aware-
on that. I'm sorry, Denise is on that committee as well with Sussex. So she'll be working on that to make sure that that happens.
Kara, are we at the end of our questions? I'm aware of the time and I don't want to keep people longer than we need to. So where are we in our?
We're at the end of the questions in the chat
Oh,
box, and
perfect.
now it's just open chit chat if everybody wants.
Okay, so then let's do this. For those people that need to go, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for being here. And I guess Denise and Sandy and Carol will be happy to stay on if people want to still ask them questions. So thank you very much and have a great day.
And thank you, Marge, for having this be sponsored as the Newcastle County League Hot Topics Luncheon.
Well, it was great and you are great resources. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marge. Thank you, everyone.
Had a great turnout.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is Marlene Saunders. I'm just going to say this and then I'm going to sign off. And I put a message, in the chat. But I think these presentations are just so essential to political engagement, on the part of ordinary people. And I'm going to do my part in, distributing or whatever the word is, presenting this presentation to or linking people, to this presentation, like the one that's upcoming on February 3rd. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Marlene. And
Thanks, Marlene.
be sure to let Denise know how many people you reach so that we can keep track of that. Thanks.
Yeah, Connie and I were chatting and I let her know that I would give my data to Denise in terms of, participants. So
Great. Thanks a lot.
all right then.
We appreciate it.
I have a quick question. So again, terrific presentation. Thank you. I wanted to know if are you all in touch with Charlotte King and Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice?
Absolutely.
Do you have a presentation plan for those folks?
Not yet, but we hope to. We talk to them all the time.
Oh, good.
Charlotte's one of my best friends.
Oh, I love that. Okay, that's terrific. And then the other question is, are you all in touch with, I believe it's Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative? So are you in touch with them at all yet?
I don't think we have them.
Okay, I'll find out about that because that would be another wide-reaching.
Yes.
Yeah, that would
great.
be helpful.
Okay, thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
So long.
Hi, this is Jack. For
Hey,
Denise.
Jack.
For
Thanks for agreeing to have Jack and Denise on your Blue Coast
Oh, well, thank you.
program.
This is just house cleaning. Denise and I are playing phone tag.
Telephone tag, right.
Yeah, so I owe you a phone call. So now that I have you, what's the best time for you?
For us to talk?
Yes.
You can talk right now
Yeah, we all like to
if you want
listen.
to.
Well, we have charts we're sending
Yeah.
back and forth.
Oh, okay, great.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
Let's see. How about next week? How's
I can call you
Tuesday?
today.
Yeah, sure. Today's good. Mhm.
Okay. Is there a time?
After this call's over, I'm good.
Okay, I'll call you. And I apologize to the group, but we've been going back and forth a lot.
That's okay.
I'll call you after this is over.
Okay.
Glad to
Look
get some
forward to it.
business taken care of. Thank you. Thanks for everything, Bill or Jack.
No worries, no worries. We'll good group. We're doing a thing with Jack Young and Denise and so on.
Jack,
Good.
this is Keith. On that same note, yes, I will be representing Delcott on that.
Okay, let me get with Denise first
Sure.
and on this subject, and then call you, Keith, after that.
Okay.
And Denise is the one in charge.
I don't know about that, but
And
okay.
Denise, I sent you my contact information and
Yes, I saw that. Thank you so much, Keith.
Yeah,
I will get back to with you.
all right, bye.
Take care.
Bye, Keith. Thanks for everything. There's still people that are
Where's Jill?
muted. Do you have anything else you wanted to discuss with us?
No, I'll be getting off, so you can all
Yeah.
talk privately.
Yeah, no,
And
there's
Denise, I'll
still,
call you in about 20 minutes.
Okay, that works. Thanks.
And actually, ladies, I don't know how much we want to talk. This is being recorded and pushed out on Facebook.
oh,
So I don't know how much we want
Okay.
to talk.
okay, let's just end it unless
Sorry.
some of the muted people want to say something.
Mm.
I guess not. Okay, let's go. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks.